really mean? Who really owns Australia? This is freehold land owned by most ordinary Australians. That is the 90% who live in suburban towns and cities. And this is land leased by the pastoralists, many of them large foreign companies, and farmers whose forebears squatted on land in the 19th century. These are national parks where the wildlife can only be shot with the camera. And this is vacant Crown land, nothing to do with the royal family. It's land owned by the state and federal governments. And this is the land that the Aborigines have won back as a result of limited legislation in the 1970s. Most of it is barren desert, the kind of land whites don't want. Unless, of course, there's something rich underneath it.
We've got wastelands, wetlands, all swamps and all this type of business. And also, we own the Great Simpson Desert. We own the Stony Desert over here. We own only deserts and waste and wetlands. That's all we own. Yeah. And also, in South Australia, we own a place, what they call Maralinga lands. Now, the infamous Maralinga. You know, that's all polluted with plutonium and all the byproducts of uranium.
Australia has the distinction of being the only country in the world to have supplied uranium for nuclear bombs, which its leaders allowed to be dropped by a foreign power on their own territory and their own people without warning. In the 1940s, the British were looking for somewhere to explode their new nuclear weapons. The central and western deserts of Australia were said to be ideal. Dr. Keith Locum, director of the Australian Radiation Laboratory, said, "There was the view in the back of everybody's mind that the land was unoccupied and likely to remain so. This view ignored the fact that an entire Aboriginal nation had lived on the land since before the arrival of Captain Cook. British history was conveniently repeating itself. More than 160 years earlier, all of Australia had been declared an empty land. At Maralinga and Emu Junction, between 1952 and 57, 9 nuclear bombs were exploded. Yami Lester was 12 at the time. His people received no warning.
This was early in the morning. I was up playing. It might have been around about 7. Sun was coming up, and it was a warm morning. And we heard this bang, and old people saying something, and when I heard the bang, and I just went on playing with other kids there. The black smoke come over, and I thought it was dust storm, but it was too quiet for dust storm. And that just rolling above the trees, then pass over, and then after that, I don't know how many days after, but most of the people were sick, and we all got skin rash and diarrhea and sore eyes and red eyes, and you couldn't open it, or you opened it and it was hurting, and tears and that all that. And I believe that some people died because of we didn't have any proper treatment. There's no white doctors or white nurses there. That's happened, I think, 1953. Then 57, I went blind then.
In Britain and Australia, a propaganda campaign was mounted to justify the tests. This was the news of the world in May 1957. Tests will harm no one. In the Daily Express, Chapman Pincher wondered who were the real opponents of Britain's harmless bomb tests. Could it be those who hate or envy the British? Could it be Jap business tycoons who are using underhand methods to beat Britain in the export markets? For many years, the Aboriginal people tried to tell the world what had really happened in Australia, but few listened. It was only when British and Australian servicemen who had worked on the tests began to suffer and die from cancers that the full horror of the bombs began to emerge. Finally, in 1984, the Australian government agreed to a Royal Commission. Patrick Connolly, who served at Maralinga with the Royal Air Force, said, "Occasionally we would bring the Aborigines in for decontamination. Other times, we just shoot them off like rabbits."